Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there we go. We are ready to rock and roll. We are going to talk a little Inter Miami football. Michelle Kaufman is kind enough now to join us. There she is. You can follow her on Twitter at Kauf Sports and catch her work there on a daily basis. I have not checked the Herald. You said you were putting together a story. Is there any breaking news we should know about?
Oh, well, I just posted a story like minutes ago,
Okay.
which is why I was late. Today is the MLS summer transfer window deadline at 8 p.m. tonight. So any moves that they want to make this summer during this transfer window has to be done by 8 o'clock tonight. And Inter Miami definitely is, if they can, only if they can make a deal that's going to better their roster and also get them some money, because they faced some very stiff sanctions with the Matuidi mess and the other 4 players that were involved. So they're not only being fined $2 million, but they're also losing $2.2 million in allocation money the next 2 seasons. So that's money that teams use to build their roster. So they're going to be at a disadvantage of $2.2 million over the next 2 seasons, in addition to the $2 million fine that the club was given. So in order to try to compensate for that, make up for that, if they could sell off a higher priced player and, get some money for that player, get maybe 1 or 2 players that don't cost as much, but also in the deal is money that they could then use, allocation money for next season, that would help them. So the player that has been mentioned the most that has drawn some interest from other clubs is LGP, Leandro Gonzalez Perez, who's obviously in this kind of case, they would be losing one of their better players, because the players that have value are obviously the players who are generally the best players. That makes sense. So if they're going to make a deal, it probably is going to be for a starter, for a good player, because that's who the other teams are interested in. And LGP is one who has drawn some interest from other teams. He makes his guaranteed compensation for this season is $1.01 million. So $1 million, a $1 million player. So that's a high priced player. And if they were to lose him, they would, get money. They would get another player, maybe who's a lesser, less expensive player. They have, they signed Ventura Alvarado, who plays in that same position. And they have Christian McCoon. They played last night without LGP. Obviously, LGP is a very good player, and it's not that they don't like him or whatever, but he's a valuable player who may be able to, it may make sense to unload him for the future of the club.
There's no doubt that makes sense. The only part that I don't know, is a team going to be willing to help them create cap space? I doubt that. They know they're desperate. They know that Miami has put themselves in a really brutal position. I just don't see them being able to make a favorable move. I see the other teams trying to make it favorable for themselves.
Trying to take advantage. Other teams are trying to take advantage and say, hey, they're desperate. We're going to benefit, and they're going to take whatever deal they can get because they're desperate. But this is where the club has to just trust Chris Henderson. Chris Henderson is one of the most respected, general manager, sporting director, whatever title you want to use. He's very, very experienced in dealing with these things. He has good relations with, with other people in the league. And, I don't think he will be taken advantage of. If there isn't a deal that makes sense, they're not going to do a deal. They're not going to do a deal just to do a deal to get a couple $1,000s. They're not going to do that. They're only going to do a deal if it really makes sense for them. So if it doesn't make sense, they will go on as they are and deal with this stuff later.
Yeah, well, as I've watched over the first 2 years, whatever deal they think makes sense doesn't ever really make sense.
It doesn't always make sense, right?
No. So what the hell do they do with Pizarro and Matuidi? That's really what I want to know, because you're wasting 2 DP spaces right there. And and they're paying Pizarro so much. Mexican clubs are struggling financially. So I don't even know what Mexican club is really going to take him on. And then Matuidi's another guy that he would have never gotten that money in the open market that he got from Miami. So is there a chance that they swallow these salaries? Because I know Jorge has lost a lot of money in all of this going on, and I'm sure he would be very pissed if he has to swallow those salaries in order to get rid of those guys. So how do you dump that extra weight?
I don't know. I mean, I think Pizarro, the fact that he's on the Mexican national team, he played, he got to play significant minutes in the Gold Cup. I think he still has value. I think he still has value, especially in Mexico. I think he's still well thought of there, and maybe there's a club that they could trade him to there. I mean, that would make sense. They've obviously proven that they can play without him, even though they he brings certain things, but they've proven that they can play without him and win. They won the other day without him there. So yeah, that one would make sense. Matuidi, I don't know what you do with Matuidi. I mean, he's the second highest paid player on the team, and just isn't the kind of game changer that you would think you would get for that kind of money. I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that.
Right. And I read in The Athletic, which you can tell us if it's true or not. Robbie looks like he's off the table. They're not there, because I'm sure that's the guy that a lot of people are going to inquire about, because he's so young and talented, and he's still scratching the surface.
Right.
I mean, yesterday's play was amazing, that the defender got a header on it, but that no one on that team can do what Robbie can do. So tell me they're not trading that kid.
Right. No, they're not going to trade him. They're not going to trade him. They consider him extremely valuable, and as it mentioned in there, he's a generation Adidas player. So, for complicated reasons, his salary doesn't count as much against the cap and whatever. So, no, I don't see Robbie Robinson going anywhere. I think the guys we're talking about, Gonzalo and LGP, that type of player is who I think those are kind of higher priced players that are expendable, that they could win without. And I think the fact that they signed Ventura Alvarado, from the Mexican League, a guy who plays a lot like Figal, they said. So now apparently he got injured, but it's not a major injury, and he's supposed to be back, I think, for Sunday. So we haven't seen him play yet, but he's supposed to be a pretty good player who was playing in Mexico and could fill in as a center back. So anyway, yeah.
All right, last night, a tie, a draw on the road.
They're on a 3-game unbeaten streak. They're on a 3-game unbeaten streak out of being beaten 6 games in a row. So that's a start. That's a start.
Can't complain. So what do you see different right now? Because I heard the coach, and I hard to argue with them. We're seeing at least more of a team playing together. At least they have their limitations. We can see it. We know that offensively they're not a potent team whatsoever.
Right.
So they've got to keep everything tight, but they're willing to play pretty good defense at least.
Yeah, last night he went with 3 holding midfielders. They had played with Federico Higuain, who's much more of a playmaker, an attacking player, always looking forward. Last night he took a different approach, because Orlando City, I know that they respected their attack a lot, and with Nani in there and Mueller and those guys and Pereira and whatever, those are players who, if you give them space in the middle, they're going to find space and they're going to kill you. So his goal last night was to basically clog up the middle, close up all the lanes in the center of the field. And so he played, Victor Ulloa, who continues to quietly be one of the most consistent players on the team. And he ends up, serving the delivery for the cross for the goal to Kieran Gibbs. So, he went with Matuidi and Gregory and Victor Ulloa, who are 3 more defensive-minded midfielders as opposed to attackers. And then he said he also wanted Lewis Morgan and Robbie to play more in the middle also, as opposed to too far outside, so that the middle of the field, they closed a lot of spaces and kind of suffocated Orlando from being able to move around as much as they like to move around. And that strategy definitely worked against that team. That definitely worked. They played well together, and really up until, the first 30 minutes, they were doing it exceptionally. Toward the end of the first half, as we saw, they let their guard down a little, started doing some of the stuff, that giving them a little too much room. And when you give them a little too much room, Orlando can be a very good team. So they ended up giving that goal in stoppage time of right before halftime, which the one thing I will say that shows evolution of this team is that earlier in the season and even last year, when that would happen, that's very deflating. You basically dominate a half, and then right before the whistle, the other team scores, and it's like, wah, wah, you're going into halftime, and the other team just scored. They have the momentum. That can really deflate a team coming out for the second half. But they didn't. They came out and they kept their composure and, ended up being rewarded for it with that goal from the unlikeliest Kieran Gibbs, a guy who's only scored 12 goals in his entire career. I just looked it up.
And it was a beautiful, by the way, it was a beautiful header.
It was.
It might have been I don't know how his other 11 goals or 12 goals of his career, but I doubt many were nicer than that one, because that
was a really, really nice goal. He really just took that long pass and twisted as the thing went spinning in, and but that's only the 12th goal of his entire career, so that's not really his forte. But other thing that
listen, I was talking about this the other day, that in these 3 games something also has happened for them. The ball's bounced their way. You know what I mean? Last night for Robbie it didn't, but overall, why they're unbeaten in these 3 games, it's not because they've been so much better than their opponent and explosive offensively or anything like that, but they've had a couple of breaks along the way. And we got to be honest, early in the season, they had a bunch of bad breaks too. You know what I mean? So it's kind of nice to see them get some of the breaks go their way. And
last night Orlando scored what looked like the game-winning goal, and it was called back for offside.
Right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
That was kind of a stroke of good luck that they didn't have any good luck much of last season or the beginning of this season. So, it just seems like it seems like things are just more positive over these last 3 games. Obviously, things were really, really down. A lot of heavy criticism of everybody on the team and Phil Neville and the ownership.
All well deserved.
Right.
Every bit of criticism is well deserved. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But you know what? Like I've said this before, I talked about this. Stephen Ross screwed up a whole bunch early on in his Dolphin tenure. And then it looks like now he figured it out with Greer and Flo. It looks like they're finally headed in the right direction. Viola and Sifu, they took over. And as much as we thought of Dale Talon and what he did in Chicago, he was here for 10 years. And 7 of them were under these guys. Right. And we were all waiting for that Dale Talon from Chicago to show up, and it just never really happened. And finally, they made the tough decision of finally getting rid of the guy and the Bobrovsky stuff and all that. And they've made their mistakes, and now it looks like they finally found the right GM now that is making the right moves for them. Jorge Mas is no different than any of these 2 guys or any owner of a new business. When
Jorge
you start
has never been in sports. Yeah, he's never been a sports owner, and
exactly.
It's very different from owning Mas Tech. He's very good at that, but from owning that to owning a sports team, that's a completely different animal. And new owners, I think they come in a little bit, I would say, both arrogant and naive.
And Beckham too, by the way, Beckham too, because it's his coach that's on the pitch right now. Matuidi is his guy. So he's had his own influences, and he's helped screw things up here, also. So it's not just Jorge, it's not just Beckham, but they're both new. One was a player, the other guy runs Mas Tech, but neither guy has run a soccer team before, just like Ross and just like Viola and Sifu, and just like any new business. When you start a new business, you are going to make mistakes. That's normal. And I think that's what Jorge is going through right now. He's going through the process of learning how to do this the right way. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a completely different thing to own a sports team. And I think a lot of business people who are successful, they just think, I'm a successful business person, so give me a business and I'll make it a success. And that's not how it works. You have to learn the business first and then you own it. So this is kind of backwards. You own a team and then you learn the business. It's different from how most people go into businesses. They usually know something about the business that they're going into, but if they don't, there's definitely a learning curve. So
and you and I have a luxury that most people don't, Michelle. We've been around Stephen Ross, we've been around Viola and Sifu, we've been around Moss. They want to win as badly as Mickey Harrison. Mickey was just fortunate that he made his first decision was the greatest decision anyone could ever make. Pat Riley, and it fell all into place for him. These guys couldn't find their Pat Riley. You know, Joe Robbie had George Wilson until he got Shula, and then it took off for him. And so that's all we're going through. And we've been around these three groups. They want to win as badly as Mickey Harrison. They just need to figure it out. That's all it is. It's not a lack of commitment. You know, with the Marlins, we can still question their commitment. We can still question we can't question Jorge Mas's commitment. We can't question Viola and Sifu or Stephen Ross. Those three have proven that they'll spend
money. They will open that checkbook and write checks.
Yeah. So they just got to figure it out. And that's, to me, what Moss has got to do now. And maybe he screwed up the first time, right? They hired McDonough instead of Chris Henderson.
Right.
But luckily, Henderson was still around for them to then get him back on the second go around. Maybe we're in a different place right now if Chris Henderson's the guy from day one.
Well, you look at Seattle. I mean, this league, one of the things is, which Alexi Lalas mentioned in the story that I had, last week, and that Phil Neville has mentioned too, MLS there's a lot of parity in this league. They manufacture parity in this league. And in doing so, Phil Neville has said this may not be the best league in the world, but it may be the hardest to win. Because one of the things that Alexi agreed with that statement, because the thing is, when all the teams are basically not that different, the difference between the number 1 team and the number 27 team is not
like Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga is what you're saying? Something like
what
that?
I'm saying is, like in Europe, there are most of the leagues in Europe, the top leagues, you've got your top few powerhouse teams, and then there's everybody else. And so one of the things Alexi said about the foreign players who come here, including Matuidi and Higuain, who both came from Juventus, they both came from an Italian powerhouse team where basically during the season, 3 or 4 games, they were going to face a really, really tough opponent, 3 or 4 opponents. The rest of the time, they didn't have to work quite as hard because they know we are better talent-wise than that team. We're better talent-wise than that team. We're better than that team. When you come to MLS, and you can see Miami is the 27th ranked team, really, out of 27 teams in the league. They're last. And yet, in the last 3 games, they've been toe-to-toe with 3 of the top teams. So that means the difference really between the top team and the bottom team is not really that big in MLS. There are only a few exceptions, like Seattle is consistently a winner in this league. And New England, to be consistently a winner in a league like this, where everybody's kind of the same in many ways, that takes a really special management, coaching, and everything. And so Seattle has that. Seattle has managed, even in a league where there is a lot of parity, they've managed to be near the top or at the top just about every season. And that is where Chris Henderson came from. So he knows what they're doing in Seattle. He knows how they got to where they are. And, I think he's trying to employ those same things here. But the truth is, this league is again, not the best players in the world are playing in this league, but the fact that the difference between top and bottom is not very big makes it a very difficult league to win.
Yeah, no. And Henderson inherited a mess, which will make his job that much harder to get out of this entire thing. All right, Michelle, as always, I appreciate you. You tell them to hold on a minute.
No,
You'll
it
see.
was a junk call. I just saw it was a junk call, so I hung up on the. No offense to the police society of whatever, but I love the police and everything, but I'm not answering their phone call. So
I got you. I never answer either because they're usually chasing me. But anyway, we will catch up again. Let's see if the boys can get it done Sunday against Nashville.
Sunday against Nashville, yeah, that's going to be tough. Nashville, by the way, apparently they rested 6 or 7 starters last night, so they are going to be fresh. Miami's going to be coming a third game in 8 games. So we'll see. But he sat last night. Gonzalo went out in the around 60-something minute. Robbie Robinson also went out. He's okay. Apparently, he bumped his head or his neck or something, but they said they didn't think that it was anything. He is supposed to be back on Sunday. So we'll see. It's gonna be back at home, and but that'll be another tough game.
I'm with you. Follow her on Twitter at Kauf Sports. More importantly, catch her exceptional work there at the Miami Herald website. Michelle, as always, you are awesome. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. There you go. The great Michelle Kaufman. You got to love it. Appreciate her always joining us here on the program, talking a little Inter Miami. Always love talking a little Inter Miami. And George will figure it out, dude. I'm telling you. Unfortunately, they've screwed up a lot.